Welcome everyone to our 7th annual Trail Summit. If you have just joined, please let us know who you are and where you're from in the chat. This is the first part of a 4-part virtual series that we're having in lieu of our traditional regional conference. And I am Palmer McIntyre. I'm with Piedmont Land Conservancy and Piedmont Legacy Trails. And we opted for this virtual platform back in December, not knowing the trajectory of the pandemic. And so while this format has its advantages, certainly it's easier to get here from far away. You don't have to drive. That's got its disadvantages too. So we are really happy to be offering in-person field trips to accompany our morning webinars each Friday afternoon of this month. So we've got a great lineup for all of that, and encourage you to just jump into those. Those are going to be really fun. We're looking for good weather for all of them as well. So we're going to have 4 Friday mornings in March with great topics. Today's topic is successfully engaging volunteers on trails projects. We'll hear from Jeff Brewer, a crew leader with the Friends of Mountain Sea Trail, and Bill Bruce, the town manager of Oak Ridge. I'm going to share my screen. Here I am getting started without my screen on. Can everyone see that? There we go. Okay. So we do have a great lineup for the rest of the month. Next week, we'll be thinking bigger, looking at state and regional trail planning. We'll hear from the folks behind the Great Trail State Plan. We'll hear from me talking about some advocacy work. And then we'll hear from our friends down in Charlotte about all the amazing things they've been doing there with the Carolina Thread Trail. Then the next week, we're going to move over and talk about some innovative strategies for funding and what the future looks like. We'll hear from Wake County and how they've been really incredibly successful in funding trails and greenways through bond packages. And we'll hear from Mitchell Silver, our keynote speaker. He's the former parks director from New York Parks, and he is a fabulous speaker and will inspire us all. And then the last Friday, we're going to look at some trail case studies in urban and rural environments. We'll hear about a project down in Princeville with the Conservation Trust for North Carolina. And then we'll hear from Spencer Finch about the circuit trails in Philadelphia. They call that 100 miles of happy. So we're looking forward to hearing from all them. But I do want to acknowledge our sponsors. Of course, Piedmont Land Conservancy and Piedmont Regional Council are our hosts, but we have sponsors, the North Carolina chapter of the American Planning Association, ALTA, Destination by Design, the local government federal credit union, and McAdams. So we are really grateful for their support for this program. A couple little housekeeping notes. We ask that you all stay muted for the entire webinar. We'll do questions in the chat, and Jesse is going to be our chat moderator today. And we are recording the webinar, and it will be available to y'all within a week. And we'll also be posting a link to our website. There are planning credits for those of you who are looking for some credits, and you see that number here. We'll also share that in an email to y'all following this presentation. But a little bit about Piedmont Legacy Trails first. We are a regional trails collective serving 12 counties in the Piedmont Triad of North Carolina. Our purpose is to promote and support trails all across our region. And one of the ways we do that is by holding an annual trail summit on relevant topics. But we also promote trails through social media platforms. We have a regional trail finding map at our website, piedmonttrails.org. And we've published or are in the process of publishing county-based trail guides and a regional blueways guide. I'd like to introduce our Piedmont Legacy Trails team. I'm on it. I've already introduced myself. We've got Jesse Day with Piedmont Triad Regional Council. Say hey, Jesse.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
We've got our executive committee volunteers who help bring this program to you today. We've got David Kraft and Roger Bardsley. If they're both on here, y'all can say hello. But before we kick off our presentation, we have a very special award to announce. Back in 2018, we gave our first Legacy Trail Award to honor individuals, organizations, or projects that have had significant impact on trails in our region. We haven't given these awards in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. So we're making up for lost time, and we're giving one of these awards at each of our Friday webinars this year. So our first Piedmont Legacy Award this year goes to, drum roll, Mary Joan Pugh. Mary Joan Pugh is currently the volunteer Randolph County Trails Coordinator. but she has been making an impact on trails and natural places her whole career. Her love for nature started as a young girl on Sunday afternoon excursions from her home in Asheville to Pisgah, to Craggy Gardens, to Mount Mitchell, where she gained a love for beautiful views. And here she is in her element on a trail, being in the landscape. She always wanted to do something to protect wild places. After earning her undergraduate degree in zoology, she saw how frustrated researchers were and recognized that policy was the way to accomplish conservation. So she pursued a master's in planning, went to work for the city of High Point, where she helped create High Point's first greenway, along with water supply protection and density rights. After a few years in Raleigh as Assistant Secretary of the then Department of Natural Resources and Community Development, advancing watershed policies, she landed in Asheboro at the North Carolina Zoo, where she worked for nearly 20 years, championing the largest land conservation program of any zoo in the United States. The Warries became her home and a beloved landscape. She has worked really hard over the years with a lot of great partners, helping close the gaps on the Uwharrie Trail, a national recreation trail, and even earning her Sawyer certificate so she can help in the Burkhead Wilderness where they don't allow any power tools. But after retiring from the zoo, and I might add, being awarded the Order of the Longleaf Pine, Mary Joan immediately began working as the volunteer Randolph County Trails Coordinator. And I said Mary Joan was a planner. Well, everything she does is strategic. There is a goal, but there's also a process to get there. And that's what she has done so incredibly well. As the volunteer Randolph County Trails Coordinator, she has carefully and effectively built a trail culture in a county that has never even had a Parks and Rec department. So how does she do this? She does it through her local involvement, relationships with people and partners, and programming. So now she's helping small town put trail projects together and working on the Deep River State Trail. She has a lot of fun at what she does. She organizes mayor fitness walk programs, Saturday hikes, getting hundreds of people out on trails each year. She takes Hope Haywood, pictured here on the upper left, a county commissioner in Randolph County, regularly on hikes. She's engaged the tourism authority, and as a project partner, even the county finance director. She's even gotten her county to invest $1 million of the American Recovery Money Act into trail projects in Randolph County. In her words, it's all coming together and it's exciting and rewarding. The new mayor of Franklinville, which is a small town on the Deep River State Trail, represents what can happen when it all comes together. In his words, he recently told her, I was against the trail, but now I'm for it. It brings people here. So seeing really is believing. So for all this, we wanted to recognize Mary Joan's significant contributions to trails in our region. Thank you, Mary Joan. And your award, which is a handcrafted hiking stick, is coming your way the next time I see you. So is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, this is a huge honor for me, and I'm humbled by it because there's so many people that are out there that are here today that are out there working on trails and doing a lot longer than I have. It's a labor of love for me. I'm passionate about getting people out into nature and the landscape because it's just a whole different experience when you actually get into the landscape and walk. So I want to make it possible for all types of people and all ages to get out on trails or the water, on bikes or whatever it is, and just enjoy nature. We've spent and once they start to enjoy nature, they want to do more of it, and they want to protect our landscape, and that's very important that we protect our landscape. So it's just I just enjoy it so much. I went hiking yesterday with a friend's first cousin, and she discovered the outdoors when she was 51. I mean, good gracious, I want people to discover when they're 1 year old to get out. And she said that she's gone all over. She's gone to national parks, but you shouldn't have to go to a national park or even out of the country, or you should be able to do it in your backyard. And one of the things that she said to me that was just wonderful was that you have a really nice backyard. So I would like to make the whole Piedmont area, a nice backyard. You don't have to go to the mountains. You don't have to go to the coast. You can stay right here and enjoy all of our wonderful natural areas. So my tagline is I am promote trails for the health, wellness, economic benefit, and quality of life for all who live, work, and visit the Piedmont. So thank you very much. This is a huge honor for me.
Thank you, Mary Joan, for inspiring all of us. We're really grateful, and you're fun to work with too. So now, as I mentioned earlier, speaking of volunteers, our topic today is engaging volunteers, and we've got some experts with us who have been doing that really well. I'm going to pass it over to Jesse, who's going to introduce our speakers.
Good, thanks, Palmer. Good to be with you all, and Mary Joan, thank you for your leadership, and well deserved. So appreciate all you do. I have a distinct honor to introduce our speakers today and talking about our topic of engaging volunteers on trail projects. So without further ado, I'll jump into that. So we've got Jeff Brewer here with the Mountain Sea Trail to talk a bit about his work on Falls Lake. And I met Jeff in, I guess, 2007 for the first time when we had the annual Mountain Sea Trail meeting. I think it was probably at Burr Mill Park, and probably had 20 people there. Alan DeHart was there. And so I was just kind of getting my feet under me and planning. And it's the first time I got a chance to meet him. And he was a student of Alan DeHart. In 2003, became the sixth person to through hike the MST across North Carolina. And then before that, or during that time, for over 11 years, so as toward the tail end of his tenure as president of the Mountain Sea Trail, started in 1997. But ever since that, he's been really leading volunteers at the Falls Lake section of MST, where the first 26 miles were established in the mid 80s, and then the extension of the MST in 2007, about 30 miles of that. And so currently the Falls Lake section of the MST is 63 miles and has 3 campsites. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about your experience and share with our great set of volunteers and planners and advocates here, give them some tools for going forward. So thanks.
Hey, sounds great. I hope everybody can hear me properly. I'm over in Chapel Hill today working and doing my thing. And so, hey, first of all, thanks for letting me come out and speak. And hey, it's great to be around so many like-minded people who love trails and love to hike and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So for about 25 years now, I've been leading the trail crew over at Falls Lake. And for our major work days, and we're going to talk about some of those, we can have anywhere from 35 to 65 to 115 volunteers show up. And so it is like herding cats in the morning to get everybody organized and out doing what they need to do. And we're going to talk about how we make that happen at Falls Lake. One of the documents that was emailed out to everybody is a PDF file. And that is the official MOU, MOA of how we work together at Falls Lake. As Jesse was saying, the first 26 miles was built back in the early 80s, and we wanted to extend that another 30 plus miles. And so to do that, we had to work with Army Corps of Engineers, North Carolina Wildlife, Durham Parks and Rec, Wake County Parks and Rec, and state parks and wildlife. So we have 5 land agencies that we had to work with. So the document that's been sent out can be a great boilerplate for all of you to use when you want to extend your trail and you're working with multiple agencies. Now, I will tell you, it took us 7 years to get that document signed. So that was 7 painful meeting years of trying to make that happen. And what was very frustrating was we thought we were very close to having it signed, and then that individual that was going to sign it would move up where they're at, and then we had to renegotiate with that person. So it was 7 long years. To build that 30 miles, it took us 5 years to do it. So I often remind the agencies, hey, the paperwork took us 7 to build it. It took us 5 with the volunteers that we have. And so that is the Bible playbook of what we use at Falls Lake. And that's why I wanted to share that with everybody, because it is a great document to have in your back pocket to review if you're ready to extend a trail somewhere. With my trail experience, I have found that people are very excited about trail construction, and you will have more people attend your work days doing the actual construction part. It is more challenging to have people come out and maintain trail. So that is really unique. When we started extending the trail, some of our work days we had over 100 people, and then when we get down to maintenance, we started seeing a drop off with our volunteers there. So at Falls Lake, we have 23 sections, and what we do is we divide that up, much like Adopt a Highway program, where an individual will have, a 3-mile section. We are very blessed in the Triangle area to have so many people come out. And so what we've done is every section has 2 or 3 maintainers now. And that way we divide and conquer the problems that we have with the trail maintenance and all that stuff. We have 5 major work days a year, and we have a spring work day, and that's coming up the end of this month because of we have so many trail runners out on our trail, and so we got to cut back the overgrowth that comes out. And then, of course, we always have a work day on National Trails Day. That's when everybody wants to come out and give something back to the trails. And then its sister work day is National Public Lands Day, which is always the last Saturday in September. And then we have a work day in November. And then we have started running a half-day work day in July to cut back the summer overgrowth because we have so many trail runners out, and they're running in the heat of the summer, either early in the morning or late in the day. And so that's what we've been doing. Now, those section maintainers that we have, which we basically got 65 to 75 people out, they are out walking their section of trail at least once a month, maybe every 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what's going on. And the secret behind our success is we have an email listserv. And so everybody, if you go out and hike a section, you immediately file a work report about what you did, what you saw, and that way there's no effort duplicated. Nothing drives a volunteer crazy than lugging a chainsaw 3 miles to find out that that tree was already addressed a week ago by somebody else. And so that's very important that we use the listserv, and that way everybody knows what got addressed on the trail. At our work days, one of the things that we have found very successful is providing breakfast for everybody. And so Great Outdoor Provision Company is a sponsor of ours. And so we go by, we have a volunteer that does nothing but pick up our biscuits from Bojangles or Chick-fil-A, and they feed everybody. And that spun off, and we found out that Starbucks down the road wanted to be a sponsor. And so then they jumped on the bandwagon. And so we feed everybody, and that just makes a big difference to kick off the work day for us. For National Trails Day, we sponsor a t-shirt, and we go around to the local nonprofits here. They send in about $150, and we give out free t-shirts. You would be amazed at what people will do for a free t-shirt. And we've also had RAI come out and give free t-shirts as well. I'm a firm believer in letting volunteers do what they want to do within reason. And what I mean by that is if we've got a person who does not want to dig tread, they want to do lopping, obviously you need to let that volunteer do what they want to do. If you kind of force their hand to go with the digging crew that day, you're never going to see that volunteer again. They're going to go find something else. We have got a team of people who what they want to do is blazing. They want to paint our blaze on the trees. And so they're our blazing crew. I've got one gentleman who is very tech savvy. Well, I say tech savvy, very small engine savvy. And so all he does for us is he takes care of our weed trimmers. We have about 20 weed trimmers, and all he wants to do is work on them, repair them. He's like our repair shop. I've got another volunteer who all he wants to do is play with chainsaws. He wants to repair them, sharpen them, fix them. And believe it or not, we have had great success of finding chainsaws for sale on Craigslist. He'll go purchase those, and then he'll refurb them and then issue those chainsaws back out. While we're on the chainsaw issue and weed trimmers, we have found that volunteers are very bad about playing chemistry with the gas and oil mix on our trail. And 85% of the breakdowns for chainsaws and weed trimmers is bad fuel. So I've got certain volunteers that I will issue them out the pre-mixed steel mix, and that way they don't play bad chemistry and destroy one of our pieces of equipment. I've got one volunteer, all he wants to do is get non-ethanol gas to run in our weed trimmers and saws. And so he goes and gets these cans and fills them up, issues them out at our work days. So those are great examples of letting volunteers do exactly what they want to do within reason. Speaking of chainsaw work, over at Falls Lake, and I'm sure all of you are dealing with the same thing, you got to be certified. So we have our own chainsaw class that we're running for the MST across the state, and chainsaw stuff is
Hey, Jeff, you're slowing down a bit. I don't know if you want to turn your video off. Try that. I don't know if you hear me, Jeff, but your video is slowing down a bit. We're having a hard time catching you. Well, we're trying to get Jeff's video going. I believe that's doing that for everybody. Bill, the MOA that Jeff has referenced, I put in the chat if anyone wants to take a peek at that while we're trying to get him back online. I think he's going to try calling back in with his phone. So just hang tight. But I did. Hopefully, folks can download that MOA if you didn't get it in the email that they worked out with all those resource agencies for 7 years that Jeff was referencing. So I think there's.
Hey, Jesse, you there?
Yeah, there you are. Okay.
Okay. So, hey, I'm going to go without video. Is that better?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Okay. So another thing that we have found getting volunteers, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, there are meetup groups. That is a website. There are meetup groups for everything. You could have a soccer meetup group. You could have a chess match meetup group. We have had great success of getting volunteers off of our own meetup group. You're able to engage the millennials more, and they tend to like the meetup along with seniors. There are also senior meetup groups as well. So we've had great success with that. As we all know, working with volunteers, the RSVP is a very hard thing to judge. And what I have figured out is you take your total number of RSVPs and cut it by about 25%. And that's going to give you a rough number of people who are going to come to your work days. Okay. Another thing, let's talk about, I guess, some dirty laundry issues. And what I mean by that is, with the amount of volunteers that I deal with, you're always going to have one bad apple. And it is very hard to hire and fire a volunteer. And I have learned that if you have a problem volunteer that's kind of destroying your team dynamics, you need to address it as soon as possible. And I've also learned, working with other trail groups, that it's almost like you have to document the issues at hand. It's almost like you have to pay HR and document it, and then you're going to have to meet with that volunteer and excuse them from the group. And that is a very hard discussion to have. But when you have people calling you up after a work day and saying, I'm not going to work with such and such anymore, they don't know how to run a work crew, you got a problem. And that's quickly going to get out in the community, and you've got to address it. Okay. And that's a tough one there. It's very hard. We announce our work days on Constant Contact, and that's been a great way to do that. Right now, we've got about 1,200 people on our Constant Contact list that we send out the workday information to. And so what we have at Falls Lake is I have the hardcore project leaders, and I know that I can count on them, and I know that they're going to show up to the workday and they can take 10 or 12 volunteers and go knock out the task at hand. So they're about a month and a half before our major work days, there's a lot of planning that takes place. And I know that I can count on those project leaders to show up and take those people there. So there's a lot of behind the scenes activity that's taking place that the average volunteer is not going to know about until they show up to the workday. Talk about tools. We've been very well blessed from the state of North Carolina to receive some RTP grant money to buy tools, and also through REI. And so we provide all the tools for our volunteers, and that's worked out great. Nobody wants to bring their own tools out and break them, and then they're having to go to Home Depot and Lowe's and shop for them. So that's been a secret of our success. So, hey, let's talk about MOU, MOA. So when we went to the table to extend the trail 30 miles, I'm going to go ahead and be real honest with you. We had campsites in our minds, but I knew going to the bargaining table that there was no way I was going to be able to convince 5 land agencies to let me build 30 miles. And then, oh, by the way, I want 3 campsites. Okay. That's not going to work. So what we did was we built the trail. We did a great job, and then went back to the bargaining table and said, hey, we want 3. Well, actually, we want 2 leave no trace campsites through wildlife, and those have gone very well. And then we have 1 private landowner that found out about us, and his land butts right up the Falls Lake, and that is a private campground that we maintain for him. And so these leave no trace campsites are what they are: 7 tent pads, no water, no fire. And believe it or not, everybody has been well behaved, and we've not had any trash problems and stuff like that. What we did was we established them and gave them about 1.5 years, and then went out and put in picnic tables. And it's almost like you got toddlers, and you can only give them so many toys because you don't want your toys to get destroyed out in the woods. So we were very lucky. Nobody's burnt our picnic tables down. Even during COVID, we didn't have any big time issues with partying and teenagers and stuff like that. It seemed to work out very well. So if you got the grandiose picture of trail and campsites, I would recommend you do the trail first and then go back and talk about campsites. Because when you talk about campsites, that's a whole nother ball of wax for the agencies that they get real nervous about. Okay. And we all know we all got to play with our partners, and we got to all play baseball fair. We have had great success with Eagle Scouts, doing bridges and kiosks, and that's a way to engage them as well. Bridges, we're having a very big discussion right now about bridges, and we've kind of adopted the ATC model of if you really, really don't need a bridge, don't put a bridge there, because it's a maintenance issue. We have also got a guy that has been, we've been raising our bridges up and putting metal bearing shoes under them to prevent rot there. Back to volunteers, we've got a group of retirees that are out working during the week, and they seem to have their own little work group going. Because you retire, and the last thing you want to do is go give up a weekend. You're wanting to go out during the week when you used to sit behind the computer and have some trail fun. And so we've got a whole group of retirees that have formed their own little group, and they're out working as well. Of course, first aid is a big issue. Our trail people make sure they have a first aid kit and all that jazz. That seems to be an issue time to time. Rain plan. What we do is we look at the weather the night before and we make the call either that night or by like 7:30 the next morning. We've got a little blurb we put out because, there's no need to go out and work in the 45-degree day when it's raining all day. So we have a rain contingency plan and we just bump it to the next couple of weeks for our work day. And so that's kind of how we work at Falls Lake. The internal listserv works out great. We've got a guy that's got a Google map that he is tracking all of our downed trees and knows all the shortcuts for our volunteers as well. So needless to say, we have it going on at Falls Lake. Any of y'all are welcome to come and attend one of our work days. It's very complex in the mornings getting started, but once we scatter out, we have one central meeting point, and then we scatter out and then recollect the tools either at the next work day or the project leader brings them to my house and they go back in storage. Back when we were doing hardcore trail work, we had a trailer, and that works out great. Everybody at the end of the day just puts your tools in the trailer and goes home. And the trailer gets parked and ready for the next work day. So the secret to success at Falls Lake is divide and conquer. 3 volunteers are looking after 3-mile segments. One of our worst fears is we get a bad ice storm or Hurricane Fran or Floyd comes back to pay us a visit. And then that's the beauty of that Adopt the Trail programs. Everybody scatters out and addresses the trail issue, and then the trail's back open for the hiking community. So that's what I've got for you today as far as trail work and working with volunteers. I welcome any questions about the MOU, MOA that you might have to help you guys out there in the field.
Great, thanks, Jeff. That's some great content, and really appreciate you sharing your expertise over the decades, working out there. So lots of great ideas. I was monitoring the chat, and Tom Shepard had a question about the meetups, and then I do have a question about the MOU after that.
Okay.
Other question, but his question was about, do you have multiple meetup locations on the same day, or one location and then break out?
Yeah, right. We have one meeting location that we use, and it's at a Food Line parking lot over off of Highway 98. And that way we get everybody centrally located. And then we kick off the workday with a quick safety talk about what we're going to do. And then we start dividing up into teams, and 10 or 12 volunteers per team leave that central work site and go to the trailhead. So we do lose some time there. So we meet at 9 o'clock, and then trail work is usually not really taking place till 10 because they got to travel and carpool to the work sites.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's great. That's helpful. This may speak back to this next question in the chat to the kind of partnership with Starbucks and Bojangles. But are you having anyone? I realize a lot is kind of public land and may have rules about Adopt a Trail, but the question is really about adopted trail partnerships on sections of the Mount Sea Trail through the Falls Lake section. Have you ever explored that opportunity?
No, we don't put any placards up or signs or anything like that. That's something we can't do. The Adopt the Trail is basically you're on a list and you're on the listserv. Your name doesn't go up anywhere or anything like that on the trail. It's an internal adoption that people call me up. Hey, I love to hike. Can I adopt from this section to that section? Sure, it's your section of the Mountain Sea Trail, kind of like the Appalachian Trail. They do the same thing. But we can't put signs up and stuff like that.
Right, it's a bit more informal. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Gotcha. Well, there's a couple questions too, shifting gears a little bit to the volunteers and kind of how they're recruited and screened. And so just a little bit about kind of how do you get your volunteers application or vetting process, and then what do you do about liability, I guess, waivers and that sort of thing.
Great question.
To join.
So we have a sign-in sheet, and our lawyer created a nice paragraph on that sign-in sheet that takes off the liability off of us and all the land agencies. And so some people want to sign the clipboard. We've got one person who's got a tablet for the tech savvy people that want to sign up via the tablet. But when you sign one of our workday forms, and they're standard across the whole state of North Carolina, it's the same worksheet form, that verbiage there from our lawyer takes the liability issue off of everybody. That's how we handle that.
Yeah. Okay. Does it talk to the MOU or not so much? I guess, in terms of how I guess since the MOU, you've got the MOU, it sort of applies to the resource agencies that.
Right.
Right. Okay.
I saw another question. How long do we work? Usually we work till about 4:30. We get our best work done before lunch, and after that it's a downhill spiral because people are worn out and they're used to sitting behind a computer. I will tell you, I have got some people who all they want to do is pick up trash, and that's great, but it comes to a point where the washing machine in the woods is going to have to stay. I mean, you can only pull out so much trash, and the tires are becoming a problem because you got to pay for them to have them disposed. We run into a lot of tires out at Falls Lake, everywhere. I mean, we all know there's trash everywhere in the woods. I mean, it doesn't take long at all. So we have our own little trash people who want to do nothing but pick up trash as well.
Yeah. Well, great. There's a request to get that sign-in sheet example. I don't know if it's on the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail website or otherwise, but Amy, we'll work to get that and follow up for sure. That's great. I don't see any other. Oh, how long? You already answered this one. I think that's it for questions. I did have a question about just kind of a general one about the MOU. It's a long process, Jeff. If there's one thing you wish you knew before starting the MOU process, what would have that been for those that maybe are looking for a more formalized arrangement for some of the trail work they're expanding in their part of the state?
Well, I think it went well. It just went a whole lot longer than I wanted it to, and that's tough. And it was just a challenge. And, there was a point where, I don't know if this is going to happen or not. And it's like, well, we just had to be pleasantly persistent on making it happen. And, Chris Snow, many of you know him, and he's going to be a talker coming up. Chris Snow was a great help in getting that MOA written. And we had lots of people. Kim Douglas at Parks and Rec helped us out a whole lot. But what got confusing was so many people wanted to do edit changes and stuff like that and track changes, and it just really got confusing. I think that bogged us down a whole lot trying to, what version are you working off of for your changes? And so that got kind of confusing. But at times, 7 years is a long time to kick around a document, Yeah. I mean, there are court cases that move faster than that. But hey, we made it happen. Like all of us, like Mary Joan Pugh, who just won that award right there, right? She's determined to make things happen. And when you're determined to make something happen and you've got a goal set, you're going to reach that goal. And so we just really had to plug forward and make it happen. Like Mark Gatehouse, I know he's on this. I love Mark Gatehouse. He's done amazing work for the trails in Greensboro. He's another individual who will fight tooth and nail to make things happen in Greensboro. And same with Bill Blackman. I know him too. Bill's a great guy. I mean, it's all about being determined and making it happen.
Sure. Yeah, good point. Thanks for sharing that. Well, good. Did I miss any questions in the chat? Does anybody have any other ones they want to just raise yourself? You're welcome to unmute and ask Jeff a question if that's a better way to do it.
I was interested to learn a little bit more about how maps are used for the project management aspect. I'd also like to offer free access to our mapping platform, Wander, if that would be helpful. But I'd love to learn more how we can potentially help with that side of trail maintenance and work.
Gotcha. So probably you and I need to connect offline and go from there. We've had a guy GPS our entire trail, and if you Google up Art's hiking maps, he has done the maps for Falls Lake and Eno River State Park. And we also have a guy in the FMST office, Jim Grody, and he does all of our mapping and GPS work. So probably need to get you hooked up with him, and we can fire off a conversation and see how we can all work together.
Cool. Great. I think I did miss a question or conflated it with another. I think it's also a question of how you select your team leaders. I mean, you got, your volunteers, you said you got sometimes 30, sometimes 60, 115 out there. Obviously you got some key team leaders. I imagine that's a combination of experience and, skill level of certain types of trail equipment. But can you speak a little bit to how someone becomes that team leader?
Right. So, a lot of us are very aware of our surroundings. And what I mean by that is if I have a volunteer show up for the second time for a work day, I'm going to want to get to know that person a little bit better. Okay. And then when they come to the third and fourth work day, you got a solid volunteer that's engaged with you on your trail project. And then it's time to make the ask of, hey, are you interested in working with the chainsaw crew? Or, hey, would you like to adopt this section of trail? Or, hey, would you like to lead this bridge project at the next workday or assist leading the bridge project network? And then you slowly start bringing them onto your team and into the fold. And then, boom, you've got a new project manager leader right there. But, you got to get to know these people. It's kind of like, I do a lot of construction work. I have to meet clients new every day. And, it takes a little psychology to say, all right, is this a solid volunteer? What are we dealing with here? And, of course, we try to engage all, race, age, everybody as much as we can. And so that's how I kind of move forward. And my project leaders that have been with me I got one guy that's been with me for 25 years. He's real good about picking out people. He's like, hey, Jeff, I think you need to go talk to Carl. I think he might be good for us to do X, Y, Z. And so we immediately bring him into the fold. So there's a lot of networking, a lot of partnerships, and team building there.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Thanks for sharing that. Well, folks, did I miss any of your questions for Jeff in the chat? Feel free to unmute. We've got a few more minutes before we need to move on to the next presentation. So,
hey, Jesse, just real quick, just kind of a general question. I think, everybody here has a common interest. Is there any way to get kind of contact information for everybody, on this so that someone was trying to connect with each other could reach out after this?
Yeah. We'll share that information as long as folks feel comfortable sharing that information. So we obviously collected that to register folks when Brianna, who can be here today, worked on that. So we'll be happy to share that information if that's okay.
It also might be nice to develop some kind of working group for volunteers. So people who are specifically interested in this topic, we could on a regular basis touch base and share feedback and volunteers. Because as Jeff was referring to, we've got some very robust volunteer groups in our region, certainly with the Piedmont Fat Tire group and the Trail Titans up in with the Oakland Valley Trails Association that are great models as well. So we might want to form like a little working group on that topic.
Yeah, neat idea.
Gonna have a question?
Hey.
Maybe somebody, Brewer, somebody has a question, answer to this. We've got a landowner who is willing to allow us and to sign a paper that we can put a section of trail in. In fact, we've already, in this particular case, built the section of trail with a couple little bridges in anticipation, but he's decided he does not want a permanent easement, period. But he will give us he'll sign it and keep all the hunters off. He'll do everything, except he doesn't want to sign a permanent easement because he wants to feel free to sell the land 20 years from now. That's what he says.
Hmm.
And but he's willing to sign and let us come walk the trail, do anything we want on it, maintain it. He comes out and works, but he doesn't want to give an easement because of this turnover eventually,
Maybe with time, as you continue to cultivate him and partner with him, maybe his mind will shift. I don't know.
Well, yeah.
Well, with the Mountains to Sea Trail up near Sora Mountain and everything, all those Sora trails, Jeff can speak to that. That was one of the things we dealt with a long time with the Friends to the Mountain Sea, because those were all, majority of those connections over to the state parks were on private land. And so we got easements for that. Typically, though, what they would do is they would just sign a 10-year easement, which gave us, it was easier to get a short-term kind of easement that they would then renew. A lot of them stayed on for a very long time, but it left them the flexibility of not being locked in. And so I think that's something you could certainly look at. And the other thing that you could think about is they can put the wordage in that this can be revoked should we choose to sell the property. So,
well, I mean,
thoughts.
if they give you a letter and it says that they're, of all the things that they want to do, will allow you to do on the property, and they say, come on, go ahead and walk it. And this is on a section of trail that is got a lot of truck traffic that we're going to get away from if we can do this. And if we could just go ahead and get the letter signed and get it agreed to by everybody, he will let us walk the trail now. And it's a mile trail. I mean, it's a good section. It's done. And but he doesn't want to sign a permanent easement. And is a letter as good as an easement? I mean, in terms of
I can't answer
legality.
that question. I can't answer that question. I'm not sure.
In terms of legality,
Yeah.
Bill, I mean, certainly in terms of designating something as official Mountains to Sea Trail, you can't unless you have a permanent easement. That's in the state
Okay.
rules. Yeah, but I would follow what Mark said and try and get a term easement with some conditions and start there, and just make him fully aware of the recreational use statutes that are on the books in the state, and just continue to work
Sure.
on that relationship.
I mean, if we do this, could that be, could we recognize it as a part of our trail? If these written in like a term agreement, but not permanent, can we divert traffic and invite people to come walk on that trail? I mean, it's his property, and he's given anybody permission to walk on it at any time. And he's going to make sure no hunters are on there and that kind of thing.
Let's explore this. Yeah, let's have another conversation about this.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Interesting.
Sure.
Thanks for raising that, Bill. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Hey, Jeff, I want to thank you for both your presentation and your ongoing efforts with everything you've done with the Falls Lake Trails and Mountains to Sea overall. I also want to share with you, you mentioned one of the biggest challenges that we've had with the repeated hurricanes and the snow and ice events are the tree down event. And one of the things we've been using pretty successfully in Greensboro for the last 2 years is we've actually been utilizing Trailfork's application to record trees down. With the abundance of cell phones, people can take a picture of a tree down. They can have their hiking sticks in front of the tree to help give you some sense of scale, because one of the problems with the photo is sometimes you can't tell, is that a 8-inch oak or a 28-inch oak. But if somebody puts their hiking poles or has their dog or a friend standing in front of it or their backpack leaning up against it, you get scale, which is really important, because we used to get a lot of bad data with people saying, a big tree that you need a chainsaw for, and it was something that could easily be cleared by a volunteer with a handsaw. So why lug in the PPE and saws if you can do it with a handsaw? But the great thing about the Trail Forks app is that that picture that's taken by the person who comes across it is geotagged on the map if the maps are reflected on the hiking segment of Trail Forks. And we've just found that to be really, really helpful because it gives you an idea, and it gives anyone an idea. It doesn't take the intimate knowledge of exactly what the best place to get at that tree might be and how close together they are or how apart if there are multiple events. So it's just something you might want to consider for your efforts at Falls Lake.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I appreciate you as well, my friend.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Well, a lot of legends talking this morning, and it's a blessing to be a part of the discussion and the work that, you know, think about all the work that these folks have put in that have Jeff and others. So we really appreciate your time, Jeff. I know you're on a job site. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the presentation. Would love to have you here, but if you need to get in that house and start working, by all means head off, but would love to have you for the rest of the show. So thanks for that. And I noticed, you know, Mark, you had mentioned Trail Forks. Palmer's put that link into the chat. So if anybody wants to pull up the Trail Forks app, get to learn a little bit more about that, go ahead and throw that in. Then Smith's also posted something about the Mountains to Sea Trail and state trails needing that permanent easement. I think it's a distinction from maybe a local based trail with that agreement. But well, let's move on. I want to introduce Bill Bruce. Spotlight him so you can see him. He'll be giving our next presentation. Bill is a friend of mine. He's the town manager at Oak Ridge and has over 20 years of experience as a planner at the municipal county and regional levels, and has been with the town of Oak Ridge since 2014. I know he participates in a lot of different volunteer activities across the region, resident of Greensboro, but he's responsible for implementing, of course, the overall strategic direction for the town. And have long had a strong commitment, their council, in investing in sidewalks, parks and trails. The Mountains to Sea Trail, of course, comes through there, which Jeff was talking about earlier, and have a camping spot there at the town park. And this afternoon's just a teaser for this afternoon's hike is up in the town of Oak Ridge, the field trip at 2 p.m. So please think about heading up there from where you're at and get out and enjoy this wonderful afternoon. So Bill's got a BA from Chapel Hill and then a master's in city planning from Georgia Tech. Bill, I will turn it over to you to go ahead and share your screen. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jesse and Palmer. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone and share the experience here in Oak Ridge. I guess I'll sort of by intro say that we got to kind of reduce the scale a little bit from this amazing 30-mile trail building experience at Falls Lake down to a 15 square mile town that's got a wonderful sort of volunteer and can-do history and is building trails. And this title I almost think should be how a small town is beginning this process of getting things done, learning as we go. Relatively new to this world of building trails, but what we've accomplished in the last several years has been inspiring to me, and hopefully it'll be inspiring to you too. And as Jesse said, I'm the town manager here in Oak Ridge. So, the trail planning and trail building is just kind of a small part of what I do, but it's frankly probably the most enjoyable thing that I do, just because it's something that I like to do recreationally. It's been a hobby of mine since I was a kid, and I hike with my family whenever we get the chance. So that being able to combine something I love personally with what I do professionally has just been really cool and very rewarding. So I thought what I would do today is just kind of give you a snapshot of the trails in Oak Ridge today, and then rewind about 20 years and talk about how we got to this point. Because, you know, in thinking about taking 7 years to get an MOU together, well, when you're talking in like planning terms and doing long range plans and so forth, you're really talking more like 20 years. And I think that's really the time frame that it's helpful to think about planning for something like trail building here in Oak Ridge, at least. We have a 4-mile trail network that features beautiful Guilford County open space property, the Cascades Preserve, which is in the town limits of Oak Ridge. It also features the headwaters of the Hall River. We've got 2 miles of trail at our 2 of our park facilities. Some privately maintained trails at HOAs. They're publicly accessible, but frankly, rarely used. And I'll kind of get into some of the reasons for that here in a little bit. We've got 3 additional miles of public trail easement that's ready to be constructed, and kind of missing the number down there, but 180 acres in dedicated open space above and beyond what we have in our parks property. So a real sort of focus in the town on preserving natural resources. Since 2019, we've had nearly 1,200 volunteer hours building and maintaining trails. And this is something that the second bullet point there that I'm really proud of, is that our town council has earmarked $215,000 for trails in our capital improvement program. And that number for us, relatively speaking, when you've got a $2 million annual budget and your town council is willing to spend $200,000 on trails, I think that tells you a little bit of how excited not just the town council, but the folks in Oak Ridge are about this program. So I wanted to actually, before I went, I forgot to talk a little bit about this map here, the Friends of the MST map. I love this map because it shows the wonderful Greensboro watershed trails that are off-road. It shows the trails, of course, up at Hanging Rock that are off-road, but then you've got a long stretch where you've got nothing but road hiking, except for 2 little red areas there in Oak Ridge. And those are our off-road trails that have just been built in the last several years. This map will change soon, because I know that the folks to our east in Summerfield and to the west in Forsyth County around the Blues Lake and the new park there, you're going to see more of that red sort of fill in. But this is a point of pride for the town that we're beginning to see some of those road miles go off trail. So just a brief snapshot of Oak Ridge. If you're from the Triad, you probably know where Oak Ridge is. If you're not from the Piedmont Triad, you may not even know where we are. We're sort of tucked up in northwest Guilford County, north of the airport. The Oak Ridge Military Academy is probably the most famous landmark here. Since 1852, the academy has been in Oak Ridge. And for most of that time, we were a rural farming community, up until about the early 1990s, when growth from Greensboro began to sort of encroach in this area. The sort of town leaders, founding fathers, if you will, at that time, felt like they wanted to control their own destiny, make their own decisions about the future of Oak Ridge. So we incorporated in 1998, so a relatively new town, and that's reflected in kind of the limited services that we provide. We do planning and zoning, we do parks and rec, we have an administrative department, but no water and sewer, no public works. We don't own our own roads, so we're working with NCDOT on maintenance issues. We've got a full-time staff here of 8 people. So we rely on volunteers to help us, especially in the trail building arena. I think the early history of Oak Ridge is, of at least the incorporated early history of Oak Ridge, is important in understanding how the focus on trails evolved. That growth pressure that we experience, that continuous sort of pressure to build new homes, led to a real sort of pro-planning atmosphere and a willingness to be open to creative ideas in the planning arena. So, you know, a local historic district that covers most of our town core was a very early initiative, an early focus on sort of figuring out how to balance growth with open space preservation and a consistent commitment in investing in parks. Parks and Recreation. So how do we get from those early years to today? I'm just going to kind of go through each of these over the next 15 or 20 minutes, sort of lessons that I think were important for us as we've developed our trail program. Since Jesse mentioned I'm a planner by training, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the planning documents here in Oak Ridge that I think really built the foundation for our trails program. This land use map is actually our 2016 version, but the first land use plan in Oak Ridge was adopted in 2001. And that plan recommended a pattern of permanent open space and walking trails for the town. So, very early on, the town recognized that providing pedestrian connections, trail connections between neighborhoods in our town core was a way to kind of bring people together. Our current policy is very similar, and you'll see on this map, well, you may not be able to see very well, but the purple dashed lines that sort of a web throughout the town, those are proposed trails. Now, most of those are still lines on maps, but the town is always, and for land use plans, this is appropriate to be ambitious and think about, what is your vision in 50 years? What would you like to see your town do in terms of having a trail network? And that ambitious vision has been a part of our land use plan since 2001. With the help of the Regional Council of Governments, in fact, with Jesse's help, in 2013, we adopted a pedestrian plan, and that built on the framework that was established by that first land use plan. So the trails that you see on this plan that was adopted 12 years later are just kind of built on that original framework. And this plan sort of recognized the entire system of pedestrian connectivity. So a sidewalk building program and a trail building program in the more sort of rural parts of the town that link together, and we're able to provide kind of a seamless network. And then in 2018, the town council adopted its first strategic plan, and trails and sidewalks and the Mountains to Sea Trail were a prominent part of that plan. So I think what I want to say is from 2001 to 2013 to 2018, we're talking about, different town councils, different makeups on our advisory board, an evolving town constituency, but this message of trails was consistent from the beginning. And the more I think that we talked about this as being our identity, the more it continued to show up on land use plans, on strategic plans, the more we just planned to talk about trails, the more it became part of our identity. Now, at this time, there weren't a whole lot of trails on the ground, and that was something that came shortly afterwards. But what's the kind of next step? Like once you have those plans in place, most planners would tell you that plan's a nice vision, but in order to make it a reality, you've got to put it in an ordinance, or at least from a land use perspective. So one of our early ideas was to, and this was because there was so much land development happening in Oak Ridge at the time, start thinking about alternate ways to develop for residential subdivisions. So this is just an example of a type of zoning district that the town adopted early in the 2000s. This idea that a conservation subdivision would allow you to build as many homes on a smaller amount of land, and that allows what's left over to be preserved as open space. These were the first trails that were built in Oak Ridge, and our ordinance required developers to build those trails. What we found out pretty quickly, though, was that those trails were only as successful as the developer wanted them to be, or as the HOA wanted them to be. So, you might get an example of the developer comes in and just kind of clears a path and throws some mulch down, gets his plat recorded, and then he's gone. And the HOA, if there's not someone in that neighborhood that takes it on as something that it's an amenity that they would like to maintain, then it doesn't get maintained. And we certainly have examples of that. So other more effective measures, we've used conditional zoning frequently in getting trail easements. And I'm showing this excerpt from our land use plan to show, the line on the map here that shows a future trail connection. Our conditional zoning process, and this is a state statute that all local jurisdictions take advantage of in order to ensure the compatibility of that development with your applicable adopted plans. And in this case, you've got trail plans on your land use plan, your pedestrian plan. When the developer comes to us and says, I'd like to build a neighborhood here, we say, well, in order to help you conform and for us to say that this is compatible with our land use plan, we've got a trail corridor in this area, and we'd like you to offer an easement here as a zoning condition. Developers want to get their properties approved. That's a pretty low ask, frankly. We're not asking them to build trail, but if it shows up, if their development shows up on our maps, we consistently request that they include those easements. And then that easement becomes ordinance. It becomes part of the zoning that runs with the land. So here's an early example of a public trail easement from the land use map that I showed. This was maybe 2006. And this was the first section of trail that our MST committee actually built. But it took 10 or 12 years from the time that the easement was dedicated till we had the capacity here at the town to get people out into the easement clearing and building a trail. Third tool that we used in terms of ordinances were our open space dedications. And this was a program that Guilford County adopted. And I think probably High Point and Greensboro had similar ordinances that required to dedicate areas of your development that happen to have floodplain on it or were identified on an open space map. And this was another great, and this is the trail that I'll be leading a hike on this afternoon, was an example where we received this open space dedication from the developer as part of our subdivision ordinance. 40 acres of mostly floodplain, but some areas outside of the floodplain also that were dedicated to the town as part of our subdivision ordinance. So for 15 years or so, we've been in the process of collecting scattered easements, open space dedications. Trail planning was a consistent message in our long range plans, but we needed a catalyst. We needed something that kind of inspired the town to take the next step. And that opportunity came in 2017 with the announcement that the MST would be coming through Oak Ridge. The original alignment was to follow a old railroad right-of-way through the town to our east into Stokesdale, which is to our north. And for lots of reasons, the town of Stokesdale was skeptical about whether or not they wanted to be involved in this program, and suggested that this wasn't something that they were interested in. The town of Oak Ridge pounced on that opportunity, and I feel fortunate that our town council had the foresight to say this is a fantastic opportunity for the town of Oak Ridge, and we'll take it. And the town organized or convened a meeting with the Friends of the MST and the state parks and our county commissioners, and we said that we would love to be a partner in this process, and we would love to work with these agencies and bring the trail through Oak Ridge. This is our former mayor actually at a ribbon cutting ceremony for the first section of off-road MST. The other thing I think that this announcement gave us is that it opened us up to the greater trail community. So it introduced us to the people that were able to help us make this a reality. The folks at the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail obviously were instrumental in introducing us and sort of guiding these early efforts into how we can kind of go from line on a map to a trail on the ground. So one of the things that I learned very on from attending sessions just like this was you can't have your town staff, your town manager driving this process. You need to have a group of citizens that are interested and dedicated in making this project a reality to be your guiding steering committee. So shortly after the announcement in January of 2018, the town established a permanent standing committee for the town. It's called the Mountains to Sea Trail Committee. And this is these are their marching orders. Working with landowners, advocating, promoting the trail, managing and recruiting volunteers. And every month there is a dedicated several minutes of the town council meeting for the MST committee to report on the progress that they're making. So the first project that the new MST committee undertook was in that section of trail, or on that easement that I shared with you a little earlier. About a 1/3 mile of trail that connected the Cascades Open Space Preserve, and that's a picture of the Cascades. Cascades in Piedmont are a little different than Cascades, I think, in the mountains. This is a waterfall in Guilford County. This is about as much relief that you get on a creek, and it's really a spectacular preserve. And this allowed the MST route, the Friends route, to pass through the open space preserve on its way through the town of Oak Ridge. It was more or less a spur loop that you could do on the route, but you couldn't pass through it on your way on a through hike. So this allowed the committee to really kind of cut its teeth on a trail building project. Like I said, it was a 1/3 of a mile, but it was a big deal for us, and we celebrated it. And we worked, you learn early on to engage your partners. Guilford County was a great resource for us. Of course, the Cascades Preserve is owned by Guilford County, and their Parks Department was a great help in helping us get those approvals and giving us advice on building trail through their property. Of course, Friends in the state of North Carolina. But we celebrated that 1/3 of a mile, and we made it a big deal, and people responded. And our committee has been, since that day, this is one of their major initiatives, is public outreach and support. You put a little bit of trail on the ground, you get people out walking it, one person at a time, who recognizes the value of trails, and you're building a community of support. So the MST committee is frequently at town events. This is on the left there at our Ridge Fest, which is kind of the big annual celebration in town. They have a Facebook page, of course, and it's regularly updated. They did a branding exercise, and that's the little logo down there in the bottom left, was a logo developed to brand trails in Oak Ridge. We put that on a t-shirt and we sell those as an additional fundraising task. Guided hikes are another fantastic, and these, you guys know all this. I mean, this is nothing new, and this is taking a playbook from what we learned in attending sessions like this over the years. Is, you learn from what others have done. Every time you do a guided hike, there's 1 or 2 folks that haven't seen the trail yet. They tell their neighbors, they tell their friends, and that's just another way to build that public support. The next year, the committee started working on a little more ambitious project. This is another section of the Headwaters Trail that's about a little over a mile, including a 32-foot bridge that you see there in the picture, 10-space trailhead parking lot. The materials for the bridge and the parking lot were paid for by an RTP grant that we matched with volunteer hours. I'll say that the RTP grant, even though it was a relatively modest amount, was just a fantastic kind of public relations thing to tout. This is a new trail constructed, new infrastructure put in, a parking lot, a 32-foot bridge that we didn't use tax dollars to pay for. So, we were able to say we got state money for this project. And we've got volunteers that are doing the work. This is not something that your tax dollars are paying for. However, there will be projects that will use tax dollars to pay for. But you build that public support and you build this trail identity. And I think what we're learning is that people understand the value and are willing to spend money to make that a reality. The bridge was, like I said, also built by volunteers, designed, sort of led by Roger Bardsley, who graciously lent us his expertise to help us build that bridge, and certainly other improvements on the trail as well. Appreciate his help and guidance. Joel Deaton is our Friends of the MST leader, and his expertise and his leadership and guidance are what has made these actual trail construction projects happen. A few pictures of work days on the trail, and I put this under the heading of public outreach and support, just because I think that's what these work days accomplish. When you have your neighbors and friends, and sometimes folks from outside of Oak Ridge that will drive across the county to come help build a new trail in a jurisdiction that's not even theirs. That's just a great way to continue to build community and build that public support. Jeff mentioned Scouts is another great resource. The Scouts are always interested in building projects on trails in Oak Ridge. Here are 2 Eagle Scout projects on the Headwaters Trail. The young lady on the bottom right was actually the first inaugural class of female Eagle Scouts. So that was kind of a cool point of pride for us. That's a viewing platform over a beaver pond. Other lesson that I think we've learned is that you've got to be creative and you've got to be flexible when you've got to sort of pivot on your plans. I put these 2 maps up here to illustrate on the left from our land use plan, and I'll see if I can bring the cursor over. Proposed trail kind of cutting cross country here that would connect our Cascades Preserve with the Haw River. Well, today you pull that map up and you see these parcel lines, and in reality, these are homes and backyards and front yards. And that line on a map that might have been realistic 20 years ago is just not realistic anymore. So we had these 2 fantastic off-road sections of the MST, but weren't sure what we could do to link them up. And the solution, really the only option, was to have to follow the road. So we hired an engineer from Davis Martin Powell to help us design something that would fit and be in keeping with our trail motif. And what they helped design for us was this real innovative side path that connects those 2 off-road sections of the MST. This is a half-mile long crushed stone side path that weaves kind of in and out of the right of way. It was important to us to respect the topography and vegetation. So you kind of see as it winds up the road there, it goes behind some trees. These are homes are set back fairly significantly from the road. So, but there are encroachments into front yards, certainly, and that was a challenge for us, especially since our as with most trail projects, I think we're not in a position to condemn property to build a trail. That's just not something that the town's willing to do, and for lots of reasons. So all easements are voluntarily obtained. We had 12 property owners along this path, and it took a long time meeting in person, meeting on site, talking about their concerns, expressing how determined the town was to build this project, but also how determined we were to be good neighbors. So when someone had a concern about, the flower bed that it might be disturbing, well, gosh, well, maybe we can route around it, or maybe we just commit to helping you, replant everything we have to remove. We did have one property owner who was just not going to even sit down at the table with us. She was not interested at all in participating in this project. We shrunk the side path down to 4 feet and we squeezed it in closer to the road. So we just kind of went around her, and that was, not ideal, but that's the reality. And I think at the end of the day, it sort of added a little more variety to the path and made you feel like, you were kind of wandering rather than walking straight up and down the road. A couple more pictures of the side path. You can see in some places it resembles a sidewalk. It's got ADA footpads there, but you come out of the woods on a single track hiking trail and you hit a nice 6-foot wide gravel side path. You can walk 2 abreast, gets you from point A to point B, and then you get back into the woods and you're on a single track hiking trail again. Cool project. It's brand new. It's only been in place for a couple of months, but it is so rewarding to see people already using it. And this is a part of town that is still very rural, and people were very skeptical about putting a sidewalk out on a country road, and no one will ever use it, and why would we waste our money? But sure enough, the lesson that we've all learned is once you build it, they'll use it, and they love it for the most part. So what did I think we learned from others as we were starting this journey? And these are lessons that I specifically remember jotting down in previous sessions of this trail summit. One lesson I remember very clearly was this idea that you build trails for your community. So that was, we're talking about being part of the larger MST network, but the majority of your users, and certainly our users, are local. So there are other trail projects that we're working on that may not connect to the MST, and that's great. That's okay, because we're really designing trails for the future of Oak Ridge. And the fact that it's part of this larger network is fantastic. But we want to be able to build trails for the people here in Oak Ridge. And those long-term plans are dependent on landowner cooperation. So we really embrace this idea of taking advantage of low-hanging fruit. We're not sure. We know we want to get from our new parking lot to our town park. That's really our long-term vision, to connect the Cascades Preserve with our town park. They're kind of our two green space, most important pieces of green space in the town, and we want to connect them. We're not sure how we're getting to finish that connection. We're working a couple of angles and talking to landowners, but we didn't wait. We didn't want to wait until we had all the pieces in place to start building the trail. And I think that was important, because you'd wait forever. And you need to put some trail on the ground, get people excited and talking about this new program that the town is really investing in. And we hope that pays dividends as folks understand the value and the value to them if they were to consider giving an easement. And then, of course, public outreach and support. I've heard Bill Blackley speak a number of times, and every time I'm jotting down like, wow, that's a cool idea. Get out here and invite your local businesses to be involved and support you and all that. So the people that are on this call know all this stuff. I'm telling you that it sunk in our little town, and we've taken lessons that we've learned from you guys that have blazed the trail. And even though we're just kind of starting out, the level of excitement and interest in the town is really something. We've got unanimous, and I would say enthusiastic, support from our town council. And they're putting money into the program. And we've got a solid core of volunteers that are helping us make this a reality. And of course, I'm the guy that's sitting in the office and looking at the plans and trying to get the overall strategic vision in place. These are our work crews and our committee are the people that are actually doing the work, and they could come to this session and spend twice as long as I have, giving you probably much more practical information than I did. Kudos, and obviously we couldn't do it without them. So anyway, that's our experience, and that's my perspective. I hope it's been interesting and helpful for you. I'm happy to answer any questions or anybody might have.
Bill, thanks so much. That was a great presentation and a great catalog of continued effort you and the council members and members of the town and county have worked on. So thanks for sharing that presentation, really powerful. So folks, if you have any questions, I don't see any in the chat, feel free to drop them in there. I do have one question. It's a little geeky on government side of things, but you know, with the American Rescue Plan funding and allowance to use on Parks and Recreation and Trails, I'm just curious if from the town side, you guys are talking about using that as a way to fund future trail efforts in the town of Oak Ridge. You had mentioned the 215,000 in the current year budget for trails and yeah, so just curious kind of what you're thinking on that level, if that's something you guys have taken a step on yet.
We have, we're spending actually our entire allocation on a new park project that we have just about to get underway. But I'll say that the idea that now that we're shifting $1.7 million out of our general, that we were going to have to spend out of our general fund and using grant dollars for that frees up that money for us to use on other projects. So every project in town benefits from that money, even if it's not being spent directly.
Yeah.
So, our town council has had that level of investment in their CIP for several years running. And I don't see that lessening, especially as this committee continues to put trail on the ground and they can see the results of that investment.
Yeah, that's so important. Absolutely. Anna has a question about, I don't know if you see it in chat, some ways you entice landowners into allowing easements and trails.
Well, I think that just being willing to take a lot of time and being willing to be a good neighbor. We hope that as the trail program grows and more people use them and see the value in trails, that helps to percolate the mindset of everyone who lives in Oak Ridge. Of course, there's going to be people that are always going to be resistant to any kind of public access on their property, but there are some that may just not see the value personally or overinflate the risks. And if you're able to show a neighborhood, for instance, in which a new trail was built, and on the Headwaters Trail where we'll be walking this afternoon, you pass pretty close to some backyards. Those folks were not unanimously excited about the trail to begin with. Now their kids are back there playing in the creek and running up and down the trail, and we don't get complaints. Everyone seems to see the value in it. And I think that's real important, taking your time and being respectful and being willing to listen and understand when it's not going to be an option to and walk away.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Bill. We appreciate that. We're at our time, so I'm going to turn it over to Palmer. Thanks for being here and looking forward to folks being able to join you, maybe with follow-up questions this afternoon on the presentation you just gave. So Palmer, take it away to close us out.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to our speakers, Bill and Jeff. Appreciate it. It was great information. Thank y'all for being here today. We've got a great lineup coming up. Join us next Friday. We're thinking bigger than the next one. We're talking about money and big money through bonds and other ways and some future inspirational ideas. And then we'll drill into some case studies on that last Friday. And again, we just want to shout out to our sponsors, and don't forget our field trips. Please come out and join us on these field trips. We'll be up in Oak Ridge today, looking at that side path and the trail that Bill just talked about. And then next week, when we're going to Winston-Salem, you can rent an e-bike or bring your own bike. We're going to look at Winston-Salem Greenways. We're going to go urban there. And then the next week, we're going to get a sneak peek at the Vade Meekum addition to Hanging Rock State Park and look at the Moore Springs mountain bike trails that are just across the road from there. And then finally, we'll wrap it up on our last Friday. Hope the weather's good. We'll be at the Madison River Park, where a bunch of partners work together to remove a dam and put in a water play area and do a short 3-mile paddle down to the next takeout there, just near Madison, North Carolina. So go to our website. It's well, I guess it's here, right here at the bottom of the slide, piedmonttrails.org, Summit 22, and sign up for those field trips if you like. Again, thanks for being here. We'll hang out for a few minutes if anyone's got some little discussion, comments, or things to talk about. But again, appreciate you being here today.